So how do two friendly nations, two NATO allies for crying out loud, how do they fight a war? Well, the answer might surprise you. It has a lot less to do with bottles and a whole lot more to do with bottles. Just look at this. On one hand, you've got the official stuff, right? A flag getting planted to claim territory. But then, on the other hand, you see the spoils of this war, and it's liquor and some snacks just left for the enemy. Yeah, it's pretty clear right from the get-go this was not your typical conflict. So, today we're diving into what is, without a doubt, the most polite international disagreement of all time. We're talking about the Whisky War, the world's friendliest border dispute. All right, so how on earth does a war get fought with whiskey? Let's unpack the story behind this incredibly friendly dispute. Okay, so at its core, the Whisky War was a border dispute between Canada and Denmark that kind of simmered for almost 50 years. Now, the thing is, both of these countries are longtime allies, and the stakes over this one tiny little island were, let's be honest, not very high. So the whole thing stayed completely peaceful. Not a single shot was ever fired. It's really a one-of-a-kind story in diplomatic history. So what was this all about? What were they fighting over for half a century? Well, the prize at the center of it all was this tiny, remote piece of rock called Hans Island. And here it is, this barren, windswept rock. That's Hans Island. It's sitting right smack in the middle of the Kennedy Channel. Now that's the waterway that separates Canada's tippy-top northern territory from Greenland, which, is an autonomous territory of Denmark. And just how big is this hotly contested piece of real estate? Just 1.3 square kilometers. That's it. It's basically a tiny speck on the map, which honestly just makes the fact that this dispute went on for 50 years even more wild. So a little more about this place. The island, which is actually called Tartapaluk in Greenlandic, is totally uninhabited. It's barren. Now, it was used way back when by Inuit populations, but its importance today really just boils down to one simple geographic fact. It sits almost perfectly on the maritime border between Canada and Denmark. So, how did this whole thing even get started? You might be surprised. The origin of this 50-year disagreement wasn't some big invasion or hostile act. Nope, it was just a line on a map. Okay, so picture this. It's 1973. Canada and Denmark sit down to draw out their maritime border. They're drawing a line right through the channel. Everything's going great, but then they get to this tiny island and they just can't agree. So what do? Well, they do what any good diplomat would. They decide to just settle it at a later date. And just like that, they kicked off the friendliest Cold War in history. And that right there brings us to the real heart of the story, the part that actually gives this war its name. Let's get into the decades-long ritual of flags and bottles. Okay, this is where it gets really good. In 1984, Canadian troops land on the island. They plant their flag and then they cheekily leave behind a bottle of Canadian whiskey. But wait, Denmark wasn't going to take that lying down. Their Minister for Greenland Affairs flies in that same year, swaps out the Canadian flag for a Danish one, and leaves a bottle of Danish schnapps with a note that said, "Welcome to the Danish Island." And this amazing, good-natured back and forth, it just kept going for decades. And the rivalry even spilled over into the digital age. By 2005, the whole thing became so playfully absurd that, get this, both sides started taking out Google ads to promote their claim to the island. I'm not kidding. You just can't make this stuff up. But, all good things must come to an end. After decades of these friendly exchanges, it was finally time to get serious. Time for peace and a real diplomatic resolution. A real turning point actually came back in 2005. Things got just a tiny bit more tense, and the Danish Prime Minister at the time, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, basically said, okay, it's time to stop the flag war. He declared that this kind of thing really has no place in the modern international world. And then, in 2022, the timing for a final resolution became incredibly important. With the whole world watching the violent invasion of Ukraine, Canada and Denmark decided it was time to make a statement. They finalized a deal, basically showing Russia and everyone else that international land disputes can, and absolutely should, be resolved peacefully. So what was the solution? It was actually really simple and kind of elegant. They just agreed to split the island. A brand new international land border was drawn right down the middle, giving each country a piece of the rock they had so politely bickered over for all those years. And this deal had a really surprising and kind of cool outcome. See, before 2022, Canada's only land border was with the United States, and Denmark's only land border was with Germany. But after this agreement, boom, Canada and Denmark officially became next-door neighbors, sharing what is now the world's northernmost land border. So in the end, the Whisky War didn't conclude with a bang, but with a handshake. And it leaves us all with a pretty hopeful thought, right? If a 50-year dispute over territory could be solved this peacefully, maybe even over a friendly drink, well, it really makes you wonder what other conflicts could be too.